Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Coaster Kings Radio. My name's Ian.
And hello, I'm Pete.
And today we're going to be taking a look at the two biggest coaster parks in America, Cedar Point and Magic Mountain. Now, I am new to this format of podcast. Pete is also new. And we're based in Ohio, so we're Ohio boys. But we recently did a trip out to California. We finally got to go to Magic Mountain and compare Magic Mountain to Cedar Point. So, Pete, start us off. Tell us a little bit about our trip, how it started.
Yeah, we were there for just a few days, at least for the roller coaster portion. We'd had a little vacation afterwards, but the original plan was to see Los Angeles for a day or two and then go to Magic Mountain and then go to Knott's. But of course, as soon as we heard Accelerator was open, we went right to Knott's after getting a little bit of sleep.
It was very magical. We walked up to Accelerator and it opened upon our arrival at Knott's Berry Farm at 3 in the afternoon.
So I don't think we were on the first train, but I think we may have been on the second or third. And it was everything I wanted it to be.
Absolutely.
And more. Purple train right off the bat.
Yeah,
I don't
a great
know why
train.
that was important to me, but it was.
And I will say, Ohio enthusiasts, and we love Dragster, but Accelerator is better than Dragster.
Yeah,
handily better. Though we love Dragster, and we're going to talk about more about that. So after that insanity, we ended up going to Magic Mountain for 2 days. The first day, X2 was closed the entire time, and it was very, very sad.
We looked at it longingly in line for everything else.
And we were worried that we weren't able to get onto it. But luckily, as fate would have it, the day 2, it opened with a park. Amazing, awesome ride. So that really was our trip, but we want to talk more about these two parks, which often, I think, are compared, and they're often pitted against each other, either directly by themselves, as the parks did in the 2000s.
To be clear, Magic Mountain versus Cedar Point, not Magic Mountain versus Knott's.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah. I apologize. I was not very clear. And kind of which is the actual coaster capital of the United States, see if we can actually answer that question. Spoiler alert, we probably can't. It's hard. But we just thought to talk a little bit about that aspect of it. So I guess what we'll start with, if you're okay with, Pete, is just in general, park atmosphere. Mm-hmm. Of the two parks, which do you think has the better atmosphere? What are some pros and cons of each of them?
Well, they're very different. Cedar Point's obviously surrounded on all three sides by water. Magic Mountain is not a mountain, but a big hill.
It's a big hill, yeah. Surrounded
by, the gorgeous chaparral of the Santa Clarita Valley.
Correct.
So Magic Mountain just feels a little more grown in to the space. It feels a little more, I don't know. It may be a little more navigable, certainly.
I would agree, absolutely. And I think that Magic Mountain also benefits from being from that 1970s park design aspect. You can get everywhere easily. There's not that awful walk from the front of the gate to Steel Vengeance that's at Cedar Point.
Right.
Which takes 10, 15 minutes of just trudging.
Yeah, and seeing all the rides that you will ride, but you have to start in the back of the park.
Yes.
But Cedar Point is also just very unique in the fact that it's on this peninsula and it's, right against the water going up Millennium Force, and you're 10 feet away from the lake. It's pretty... There's nothing like that at Magic Mountain, as far as I could tell. So it's hard to compare. They're very different, and they have different feels.
Yeah. I would say layout-wise, at the end of the day, atmosphere-wise, I think I prefer Magic Mountain if I have to make a decision. But like Pete says, they're very different. But I think that the layout is really, really cool. The mountain setting is cool. It lets for you have a couple really cool terrain moments. And also, and we're going to get to this, the fact that X2 is conveniently located towards the front of the park is nice, instead of having to walk all the way to Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point.
Yeah, they both have a wow factor, because when you're going to Cedar Point, you're driving across that, that little stretch.
Yeah.
And it's just sitting right in front of you, and hopefully everything's testing except for Steel Vengeance, because it doesn't open until later in the day. But with Magic Mountain, like you could see it from far away, and then you just kind of turn onto that road, and then X2 is just sitting there like this freak of nature.
Truly.
Also not testing yet, but looking great.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And
in my opinion, Viper looks good too. Pete would disagree, but it's looking good.
It looks good. It doesn't feel good 100% of the time.
Now, what would you say, and this is something that I think that Ohio enthusiasts, because of Kings Island and Cedar Point now both being Cedar Fair parks, what would you say in terms of operations and our experiences in both parks? Which park has better ops? I'm going to be honest, we had some difficulties in our most recent trips to Cedar Point and our trip to Magic Mountain.
Yeah, I think in the race between the two, I would have to say Kings Island.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, I would say Kings Island. But our day at Magic Mountain started really well, with the exception of X2. We hardly waited at all. They opened things on time. Our first ride was Tatsu, which did a couple of cycles, and then we were on it. And
right.
It wasn't supposed to be open. The park was not too busy at the start, and I think everyone sort of focused on the front of the park. But after that, it was pretty much station waits until we hit Full Throttle.
Yeah. And Full Throttle being a launch coaster, I understand kind of being a bit temperamental, maybe.
Yeah, it broke down.
But, I will say, compare that morning to this past summer, we went to Cedar Point for a day, and we got there, we rope dropped.
We did early entry.
And the only, of the headline coasters that was running was Maverick, I think.
Which is
great.
One of the ones I would want to run. But yeah, it was...
Millennium Force was down, Steel Vengeance was down, Magnum was down, Dragster was down. They all opened later in the day. But for, this kind of reputation that Cedar Fair has as being, they're so much better than Six Flags, I feel like even if it wasn't better, it was beyond our expectations for what Magic Mountain would be, at least, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree.
And they were running multiple trains on all the coasters, too, except for X2, but we'll get to that later. But
right, yeah. Also,
multi-dimension coaster train, you do what you need to do, Six Flags. Just keep that thing running. We'll be happy.
Yep.
But I think the ops, Kings Island's the winner. I think that another thing to mention is there is a direct Cedar Fair to Six Flags comparison in Southern California, and frankly, the operations at Magic Mountain are way above the ones at Knott's.
Yeah, Knott's was... They were in no hurry.
No, correct.
On any of their rides.
And Knott's also, I think, has the weird fact that a lot of their rides are built of such a lower capacity. I'm like, y'all... Why do you keep doing this?
No real people eaters there.
No.
Even the ones that could be, like Ghost Rider, they don't particularly seem to be bothered to run it very efficiently.
No. So I think that Six Flags gets a bad rap for the operations, but the operations at Magic Mountain, while maybe not internationally renowned, if you were comparing it to a European or an Asian park, for American, I think the ops are pretty good. And I would argue that Cedar Point needs to figure out their operation situation, because ever since, I think the past 3 years, it's been pretty miserable at Cedar Point.
It's been, I didn't go to Cedar Point in 2020 because of the pandemic, and I made one trip to Kings Island there, and even that was kind of a mess. So right. I try not to judge it based on that year. This year, maybe give them the benefit of the doubt because they had staffing issues, I guess, which I guess should suggest something about their ops. But even the year before that, there's never... You never see Maverick running very efficiently.
No.
Steel Vengeance, they open it, after lunch, I guess.
It's awful. And this sounds bad, but that's the reason people are going to the park. And in my opinion, having both Steel Vengeance, Millennium Force, which still, to this day, is one of the most popular coasters in the park.
I'm going to call that one a fluke, because that one's usually open. And
I guess. I've had times where it's just been down and had problems. I don't know.
I guess it's usually open to start. It doesn't stay open. But it's usually going right at the start. When we walked by it this summer, there was a guy just with a big megaphone essentially saying, hey, this ride is not open, because everyone flocks to it.
Yeah.
Which was, I don't know, it was disappointing. So we were there on a Monday. Maybe it was just, they had a rough weekend. They were a little hungover. I don't know what it was. It was definitely a stark contrast to Magic Mountain on, not peak season.
On a not peak season, doing great, running multiple trains, doing what they can. And so I think that then that way the ops, I would give it to Magic Mountain for now. who knows? Maybe Cedar Point will get their stuff together. I'm just saying, send the Kings Island ops team to all the parks in America, because as that is the one Ohio fanboy thing I will always say. Yeah. Kings Island has the best stops in the country. Every time, even if you're waiting for a long line, you know they're moving those trains out, and you're like, this is great. I'm fine with it.
And I'm kind of a baby enthusiast, so I grew up going to Kings Island. I've only been to Cedar Point maybe total of 5 or 6 times in my life. So I just kind of assumed that that's how all parks were run. And
right.
Even when it was Paramount, I feel like they did a good job of making sure there were multiple trains on each ride, running smoothly, and it's just, that's not...
I think the legacy is probably back to, like, the 70s. Like, I feel like it's always had that reputation. But moving on to the next thing, which is non-coaster rides, before we get into the nitty-gritty, the big part of this podcast, which is, of course, coasters. It's Coaster Kings. Flat rides. We're not big flat ride people. I'm going to throw that out there.
At least when there's limited time.
Yes, correct. I will say the flats at Cedar Point has a couple of the really classics that they are running really well. Like you have the Monster and not the Troika. What is that one called? The Centrifuge. I don't know what it's called. It's the Scrambler, but on a slant. It's Centrifuge at Great America / Fiddler's Fling, if anyone knows what that is. But they have one of those. The Tiki Twirl.
Oh, okay,
the Tiki Twirl. That's it.
They got rid of their Witch's Wheel, right?
I don't know. That was pretty fun.
Those were fun. The pendulum rides are good. Obviously,
at both parks.
They both have a frisbee. The Skyhawk at Cedar Point is interesting.
Yeah, true.
They don't have those at a ton of parks I've been to, so I think that's the only one I've ever ridden.
Yeah, the Scream and Swing. I do think the flats are better at Cedar Point, without a doubt, than Magic Mountain. Magic Mountain has focused almost solely on coasters. I will say Magic Mountain does have Battle for Metropolis, so they have a dark ride, and Cedar Point does not.
Right.
Which is a shame, because like it gets hot on the peninsula during the summer, and having something indoors I think would be really great for the park as well.
I imagine we didn't, like, Lex Luthor was closed when we were there, so we didn't get to ride it. Superman was also closed, so that whole kind of the peak of the mountain was a little icy,
Samurai
a little
Summit.
chilly.
Yes, definitely.
But I imagine that's a more fun drop
than
ride
Supreme Screen, easily.
Than Power Tower.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Power Tower is fun, but it's not particularly tall. You don't have a ton of.
And we all know the SNS drop towers aren't that exciting. That sounds rude. They can be big, but they're not the most fun.
They're a good time.
They're fine.
They're not worth waiting very long for, but
correct. So I think that in the comparison between non-coaster rides, you got to give the flats to Cedar Point. But I think Magic Mountain has a few tricks up its sleeve. I just think that it is definitely the park is focused on coasters. Like, that is why you are there. Not just that why you are there, but that's why the general public is there.
They're hungry for that record and holding on to it.
Absolutely. So now let's get to the meat and potatoes, which is the coasters. I'm going to start with one area that we honestly did not experience because we're not those types of coaster enthusiasts. Pete and I aren't, which are the kiddie credits. Magic Mountain has 3 kiddie coasters. Cedar Point has 2. It's worth noting that Cedar Point's their Vekoma Junior Coaster, which is Woodstock Express, actually is a longer version than Magic Mountain's Vekoma Junior Coaster. I don't know. I think they're on pretty even footing with that regard, with their kiddie coasters. Actually, Magic Mountain might have 4 kiddie coasters now.
I know that they have more than most parks have of any coaster.
True.
So I think,
it's true. We'll give it to Magic Mountain on the kiddie coasters. They have a lot.
They're not a really high stakes competition. This category.
Though they certainly during the 2000s were playing the game of, well, if we add a kiddie coaster, then we get the most coasters now. Which Cedar Point seems to have happily stepped out of that competition with the removal of Wicked Twister. They're like, we're done. Like, enough is enough. This can be Magic Mountain's thing now. So away from the kiddie coasters, let's move on to what I call the family coasters. So the coasters that are bigger than a kiddie coaster, the whole family can enjoy. And here, there's actually quite a few really good direct comparisons between the two parks. I think we can start with one of the oldest coasters in both parks, which is Gold Rusher, which is Magic Mountain's Aero Mine Train, versus Cedar Creek Mine Ride, which is Cedar Point's Aero Mine Train. Now, Pete, of the 2 Aero Mine Trains, which do you prefer?
I mean, this is like Sophie's Choice. I love them both so much. No, I mean, it would be Gold Rusher. It has the setting, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's fun. It was whippy and kind of, I don't know, jerky in a fun way.
And Gold Rusher has that helix at the end, which is so much of a highlight.
It had it had some bite. And Cedar Creek Mine Ride I
think it's garbage. I feel bad. Cedar Creek Mine Ride is the worst Aero Mine Train. I'm saying it.
Is it? How many had they done until that?
It was
point?
the second one.
It was the second,
like second or third, I think, after the Six Flags one.
Well, it's hard to a debut album is always making a splash, whereas the the follow up doesn't.
That's true.
Always land.
I also think that the setting though, like Cedar Point, is not built for mine trains. It's so flat.
Yeah, and it's like on the water.
Yeah,
you're not mining the water.
You're just it's a mine ride.
Yeah.
There's no mine for the mine ride, but it's there.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not tremendously bothered by either roller coaster. Gold Rusher was fun, and it's
absolutely
it's yellow, which
it's different. It's different. Yeah,
not a lot of mine trains are.
Next one I think is a pretty easy one. Coasters which open with the first vertical loop days from each other, Revolution at Magic Mountain, and of course Corkscrew at Cedar Point. I am an Aero apologist, and even I recognize that Corkscrew is garbage. Hot garbage.
I've heard that it's of the Corkscrew clones the best one, but
it's not a clone. It's it's a custom looper.
What is it?
I mean,
as far as
there's not much added. There's that wonky airtime hill.
Yeah, there's not too many frills on it. It doesn't really have. I don't know. It was very uncomfortable, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. It was my first time riding it. Was this year, and Revolution. It's not going to wow you. It's not going to knock your socks off, but it's gorgeous. It's smooth. It's it's funky.
And then the terrain.
A million block zones, and the loop is pretty intense.
It is,
and it's a Schwarzkopf.
Yeah, and just a gorgeous coaster. Like just beautiful, elegant. I think Revolution is actually one of those special coasters to me that just transcends like rankings. Like it just feels special.
Yeah.
And I will say the new trains are awesome. Last time, so I'm from California originally, but I haven't been to Magic Mountain in years and years. Last time I was on Revolution was with the bulky over-the-shoulder restraints.
Did it have the VR as well?
Oh, thank God, no. No VR. But the over-the-shoulder restraints were awful because they had the lap bar and then these over-the-shoulder restraints on Revolution. It was garbage. The new trains on Revolution are so comfortable. Thank God there's no VR because that's gimmicky and silly.
Off topic, but Revolution versus Super Duper Looper. Have you?
Oh, that's easy. I think Revolution.
I think Super Duper Looper.
Really?
I do. I mean, I liked Revolution a lot, but Super Duper Looper, I don't know. I think it fit really well, and not that Revolution doesn't. I just liked it.
No, and people think of Super Duper Looper as like Revolution's kid sister, so that's interesting.
Yeah,
I'll take it. Yeah, no, I like it.
They're both really well integrated into their their plot of land, and
both coasters we hope are here for a long time. I mean, I just can't think of a better family coaster, like your first looping coaster. Those are both great options.
And those loops are intense.
They are. They're not messing around. Yeah, absolutely. So next we got Iron Dragon, the aerosuspended coaster at Cedar Point versus Ninja, which is the aerosuspended coaster at Magic Mountain.
So I have to, what's the word? Recuse myself of this judgment because Ninja was closed while we were there, and I've never ridden it. It looks very fun.
I will say that Tatsu's getting its repaint, so I think that's why Ninja was closed. I've ridden Ninja before. Easily one of the better aero suspended. No one can argue with the fact that Iron Dragon is one of the worst aero suspended coasters. It's just real slow paced.
I thought it was fun. I mean, it's not like it's not going to knock your socks off, and it is kind of in like the setting that you would expect in like a suburban neighborhood forest sewage runoff, but once it dives over the lake, it's very charming.
Yes.
And it's not very fast, but I thought it was fun. But yeah, Ninja looks
it's
better.
Definitely better. And Ninja also benefits from integration with the Aero Hydro Flume. Wow, I'm blanking on the name of the Aero Hydro Flume off the top of my head.
And that's your
Jetstream. Thank you, yeah, Jetstream at Magic Mountain,
which
was also closed. But they look so good together and they interact well together. So we're gonna give it to Ninja, which puts Magic Mountain ahead right now with all three of the family credits. going to Magic Mountain. So let's move into what I call the supporting coasters, which is important. These are the coasters that aren't necessarily the headliners, but are still thrilling and reasons to go to the parks. They might be headliners at different parks. Like if any other park had these coasters, they might be a headliner. But we're talking about
they're the coasters you go to when the coaster you want to ride isn't testing yet.
Correct.
And then you have a great time.
It's a very good time.
And you learn to deal with, taking what is available and not aspiring to great heights.
Absolutely.
As we learned on our first day.
Absolutely. So I will say the one thing that one of the comparisons are kind of difficult, but one thing that both these parks are really bad at is wooden coasters. Because I love woodies. I think, Pete, you would agree. I think we're woody people. Like, we love... I mean, in my top 5, lots of wooden coasters. Like Ravine Flyer 2. I mean, we both love the Beast.
The Voyage.
Which I haven't ridden yet. But yeah, Voyage. I mean, woodies are amazing. And both parks have one. Magic Mountain has Apocalypse, which is a GCI twister that we really liked.
I loved it. We rode it at night, which probably helped, but in GCI, they always stay within their wheelhouse.
Yeah, usually.
But that wheelhouse is very fun, and it had a fun twister layout, and we had to wait longer than we hoped.
Sure.
We got the Flash Pass,
yep.
And I left them in the car. But it was fun. I love a GCI. I love Mystic Timbers. I love even American Thunder was a delight, worth the wait. And so I really liked Apocalypse.
I think Apocalypse gets a lot more hate than it does. It really wasn't running that rough.
I think it would be better if it was called Terminator Salvation the ride.
One of the weirdest IP tie-ins in coaster history. Like,
I think it lost a few points in the name change.
Probably you're not wrong. And then of course
easily the best Terminator movie.
And then of course the Woody at Cedar Point is Blue Streak, the classic PTC, and it's gonna go to Apocalypse. I feel bad. I like Blue Streak. It serves its purpose.
It looks great.
It looks good. It's
rides
classic.
Well.
But I don't know. I think Apocalypse is a stronger ride. Next, we have our B&M floorless coasters. We have the infamous parking lot coaster Scream,
which I liked more than I thought I would. It's nothing special, and the setting is actually. I think the ride gets. Can I swear?
Yes, go ahead.
The ride gets shit on all the time for being called like parking lot the ride, which it is. But I thought it was kind of funny that you're just like you literally see the parking spaces still painted onto the ground that you're currently
No, I agree with you absolutely.
0G rolling right over.
And not to mention the parking lot coaster has an important history at Magic Mountain. The Colossus,
sure,
parking lot coaster, Goliath,
absolutely.
Parking lot coaster. I agree with you. I think it's not a bad floorless.
Against
Cedar Point's, which is Rougarou,
which is not a ride that I enjoy.
So, okay, this is my thing with Rougarou. I love the straight first drop with the pre-drop. I think that is so good. The rest of the layout just isn't built particularly well for a floorless coaster.
And it was really not built well for a stand-up coaster.
I know. So I'm gonna... we'll call it a tie. Okay, fine. Pete, we're gonna give it to Scream.
We can call it a tie because
no.
We have different preferences, so that's a tie.
Yeah, it's a tie. Okay, we'll give it a tie. A tie.
All I'm saying is I think Scream gets a little bit of a bonus point for being better than I expected, which I didn't expect much. So it's not a huge, achievement, but I don't know. I thought it was fun. I would ride it again.
Absolutely.
It didn't have a rattle. I don't know what people are talking about.
Yeah, there was definitely... I agree with you. There was no rattle. People are sensitive. Next, we have the two B&M inverts, Batman versus Raptor. Now, I am not a Raptor fan. I don't know why I'm not a Raptor fan. It's fine.
I love Raptor.
Right.
I've loved it ever since I saw it on that VHS tape.
America's Coaster Thrills.
Where you ride the rides and
3D glasses.
They have the same sounding screams on every single one of them. I love Raptor. I do think that it definitely has aged a little bit,
mm-hmm.
and it's got a very shallow drop, but I don't know. I love it. It's a green machine.
Now that over the summer, I also went to Six Flags Great America and rode the original Batman clone, and it's so good there. And I've ridden, all worth noting that this Batman was closed at Magic Mountain, but we've ridden the clones elsewhere. I do think Raptor is a better overall coaster. I mean, it's larger, it's faster, it's more memorable, and the integration, while okay at Magic Mountain, isn't that exciting.
And arguably, Raptor is just as intense. I know Batman's kind of its
Everyone's like, it's
major
so
selling
intense,
point
yeah.
is that it's very intense, which it is. You know, your feet.
Yeah.
You feel them. You feel them while you're going through those turns. But I don't know. I think Raptor is a little more elegant. I know that you don't like it very much.
No, but I would take it over. I think I'd take it over a Batman clone. But original Batman at Six Flags Great America, it elevates it. I think it elevates it. So we'll give it to Raptor. We're going to give it to Raptor. Give it to Raptor. Okay, next comparison. Let's see what we have. Riddler's Revenge. I
just want to point out, we're not keeping score.
No.
We're not making any tallies. We're just looking at a piece of paper.
So
I just want that to be very clear.
Sorry.
There will not be.
We're not doing a point system. That's not really the Coaster Kings way. We just like to give you guys some ideas about these parks. The next is going to be Riddler's Revenge, the monster B&M stand-up at Magic Mountain. And we decided to throw it against Gatekeeper, the also monster B&M wing coaster at Cedar Point. So, Pete, take it away.
It's not the most apt comparison, necessarily. They're both B&M. They're both distinctive in that they, at the time that they were built, they were sort of unique. The stand-up coaster was very popular, but I think Riddler was like kind of one of the standouts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Gatekeeper obviously has the integration into the park's entrance, which is good. It's not the best near-miss element on a wing coaster, I don't think, but it is very, I think, iconic at this point. And both rides are pretty good, I would say.
Yeah, I would say Riddler's more intense.
It's more
easily.
intense, yeah.
And the layout is really cool. That's the thing with Riddler, is the layout is super cool. The back-to-back dive loops are insane.
I just remember, I feel like Riddler was in the Guinness Book of World Records for having the most inversions on a stand-up coaster, and I was like, that's a little much. Like, that's a record that I don't think anyone's like going to be like, I can beat that.
No, and they haven't, and it's still the tallest and longest, too. So, like...
And it's the loudest.
It is very loud. Classic B&M roar. I have a hard time, because I also think Gatekeeper gets too much hate.
Yeah, it's fun. It's nothing... I feel like it's kind of a distillation of what all the wing coasters have done at this point.
Yeah.
Like, they have the twisting, kind of diving drop.
Yeah.
They have the near-miss elements. Apart from that, the elements are fun. It's, it's an intense enough ride. And I think it gets a lot out of its setting that some of the other wing coasters do not. I've not been on X-Flight, but...
Yeah, I mean...
It looks like it's just kind of sat there.
I will say, though, X-Flight actually is kind of in, like, a green setting, which is interesting. But I do think Gatekeeper gets too much hate. I would take Gatekeeper, I think, over, like, a Scream, over a Floorless.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like, I think it does a little bit more. It has some interesting forces. I like the little airtime hill at the end of it. I think that's kind of a unique element. I'm going to say this is not the best comparison, so I'm going to say, like, we really can't make a decision. I would say, overall, serving a park, Gatekeeper is a better coaster. Like, it's going to, like, people are going to like it more. Riddler is just so audacious. You can't help but respect it. And I think it's going to stay the best stand-up coaster probably ever built, unless this whole surf coaster thing happens with B&M. I don't know what B&M is doing. But I think I would go with, I think Riddler is the more intense one.
Oh, see, I was going to say Gatekeeper.
Well, I think it's another tie between those two. I think it's another tie because they're too different. They're too different, but they also both serve different purposes. Now, speaking of bad comparisons, we are running out of ideas, so we got to compare two racing coasters. Gemini, which...
One of the oldest ones.
One of the oldest racing coasters, Gemini.
Well, oldest steel, obviously.
Yes. Versus West Coast Racers, the new... for 2020, or is it 2019, premiere multi-launch, which is really good. It was really good. West Coast Racers.
Yeah, it was
Everyone
fun.
kind of crapped on it when they announced it. They were like, why do we need this little, like, racing coaster?
I think the theme is sort of a dud. If you're not into...
Yeah.
If you're not into that scene, I don't think it really resonates in any way. It's a very attractive ride.
I think that
the Mobius loop is fun.
It is. It is.
And it's always dueling, so that's also a good
compared to poor Twisted Colossus that just doesn't know how to duel. I think that we've talked about this before on the podcast, not us, but the Coaster Kings. It does solve Twisted Colossus's problem, where the duel barely happens.
But also, it sort of fills a gap that wasn't there to begin with, in my opinion. Like, I see that. Any other park, it would have made total sense, but there are launch coasters there already, and there are racing coasters there already. You know what I mean? And it wasn't. I feel like they could have done something else with that spot.
I agree. I think it's unique, though. It's kind of. I liked it more than I thought I would, if that makes sense. I enjoyed West Coast Racers more than I thought I would. I think its integration into the area is really cool. The spaghetti bowl that you walk under, I think, is really fun. It's still a bit of a head-scratcher. I would agree with that.
A head-scratcher, it's not that it wasn't fun. I really enjoyed the fact that we didn't wait any amount of time for it.
Right.
Because I don't know. It was a little bit forgettable for me, and I think that's just because it's in the park that it's in.
Yes, I think if you put that in any other park, it would be pretty standout and
even
pretty
at
special.
Knott's.
Yeah, even at Knott's, something like that. Well,
they can't fit it there, but
they could have. We like to think of it as really Windjammer Surf Racers done properly, like a smaller scale looping racing coaster. Definitely that energy. But
I think one of my biggest issues with it, I love a launch, and the launches, they certainly got the trains moving, but they weren't especially powerful.
No, that's true.
And I know that's maybe not what the whole point of it is. I know it's focusing on the duel, and that's fine. It doesn't have the things that I like in a coaster of its type.
Yeah, I'd agree. And now, once again, bad comparison, but Gemini, a lot of people don't like Gemini. I am a Gemini fanboy in a problem, like I love it so much. Like, it is one of my favorite roller coasters. I think it's so unique. I think it's so fun. I think it's actually a coaster treasure that we're not treasuring enough, because it's just special. Like, now we have all these RMCs that are like making hybrid coasters a thing, but in 1978, Arrow was like, you know what, we can build a wooden coaster too. And that ruled that skyline of that park for years. I don't know. I love Gemini. It also is pretty good at racing, which is nice. Yeah. The park does a good job operating it in that way.
I'll have to take your word for it, because when I didn't ride it until this year. I know it's crazy that I grew up in Ohio and didn't ride Gemini until 2021. And when we did ride it, a guest, I'll use the word guest.
It's very nice of you.
A guest was on her phone, so the ride ops stopped the ride and had to walk all the way up almost to the top of the lift to retrieve the phone and then send the ride on its way. So we did not get to duel on that particular occasion.
Yeah.
We may have even been lapped. I don't remember if the red train made another round. But it was very fun. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. It looked like kind of a snooze when I was growing up. Again, I'm kind of new to being a coaster enthusiast. I always paid attention, but I wasn't ever like credit hunting like I am now. But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
it did hurt a little bit at the very end. I was
those double helix, those helixes. Yeah, it does have that Arrow jankiness where you're like, my body isn't supposed to be doing this. Once again, they're really not good to compare. I think objectively, West Coast Racers is a better ride. I think
so too, but I think I enjoyed Gemini more.
I'd agree with you. I think
than I expected to, so I'm going to give it that point.
Yeah. So in our hearts, we give it to Gemini. In our minds, we understand West Coast is a better supporting coaster. Think about it. For families, it's like then again the height requirement, but for families. Okay, let's get to the A-list. So let's get to the premier rides that people go to these parks for. And we had the miracle of Tatsu is being repainted, but they reopened it for the weekend that we were there. So we got an amazing ride on Tatsu, which is this monster B&M flying coaster over the mountain.
Rides.
Yeah, 2 rides on Tatsu, one in the night too.
Yep.
And we decided to pair that up with another vaguely mythological coaster, Valraven at Cedar Point, which, how do we feel about Valraven, Pete?
I like Valraven. I've had great rides on Valraven. I think Valraven is maligned for being a hyper dive coaster with multiple inversions that cost probably $30 million
at least. Yeah, just about.
I think that the Cedar Point fanboys and girls are perhaps a little spoiled and a little entitled.
True.
And I feel like I'm on a soapbox. Valraven is good.
Yeah, it's fine. It's a serviceable dive coaster. What I will say, though, as someone who's been on multiple of the other dives without the vest restraint, which everyone talks about, there's something about Valraven that makes the diving feel so much more gimmicky than it does on Shikra or Griffin. Like, something about it's just like, oh, that's all there is. Even though it has that kind of cool little zero-G roll. Tatsu, on the other hand, gimmicky.
I feel like this is a bad comparison. We were struggling with this to do Tatsu might be better against Gatekeeper, but these are both rides that I think maybe were supposed to improve upon the blueprint that was set in previous iterations of the model. Correct. And I think Tatsu excelled at it dramatically, whereas Valraven was placed in the wrong spot.
Well, not to mention, I feel like Valraven was limited by not having the tunnel, there's a lot of things that are keeping Valraven back. It's still hugely popular with the public. Like, they love that thing.
Yeah, it's always a line.
Always a line. Tatsu is still, the integration, right? Like, with the landscape. That dive loop. I think it's very, very good. I think it's the stronger coaster. I say Tatsu all the way, obviously.
Yeah.
But don't don't be super mean to Valraven. It's still a giant B&M dive coaster.
She's out here doing her best work every day.
Absolutely.
Give an A for effort.
So now we're going to compare the only Intamin, which is wild. Cedar Point's only Intamin, which...
No, Magic Mountain.
Magic Mountain's only Intamin, which is Superman, the Escape from Krypton. It's changed names. One of the Superman. It's Superman. It's just Superman. Yeah. Versus another monster Strata Intamin Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point. No competition. Also, Pete didn't get to ride Superman. It was closed, which was sad.
I can imagine what it's like.
Yeah. It's kind of cool. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, it looks. It's iconic.
It's iconic,
but very tall.
There's no competition. Top Thrill Dragster's a better coaster, without a doubt.
But there would be no Top Thrill Dragster without Superman.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely,
I think let's just remember that. Give it to the old girl.
Superman is super unique now that especially that one in Australia is closed. Like it's special. Like it's a special coaster, and it is totally unlike anything. And now that you can go forwards and backwards, great. I think it has a wonderful future ahead of it. Okay, let's go to these coasters that broke the height record back to back with Goliath at Magic Mountain and Millennium Force at Cedar Point. Ooh, this is hard.
No, it's not.
No, it's not? Oh, wow. Okay.
Goliath was fun. Goliath is a great ride. But it's not Millennium Force.
You're right.
And I know that that's a very basic, very, expected answer, but, come on.
I will say, the first drop on Millennium Force and the first drop on Goliath couldn't be more night and day. Because Goliath is almost at this 45-degree slope, just, slowly gradually going into speed.
It's a roller coaster tycoon drop.
It is. Does have that great drop into the tunnel, which is awesome.
Sure.
And there's a real sense of speed. But Millennium Force, that first drop, and I will defend Millennium Force to this day. The first drop, you're in the Intamin T-bar restraints. You're next to the lake. It's almost 90 degrees. I think it's sublime. I think it's one of the best coaster moments around into the overbank. I think that the rest of Millennium Force we can argue about. But if you can't argue that the first drop on Millie isn't one of the best coaster moments in the world.
No. I wouldn't.
Absolutely not. And so I would agree with you. Now, I do think Goliath gets too much hate. I think Goliath deserves some credit. It's so different. Certainly compared to a B&M Hyper, which I remember being B&M Hyper's the best thing ever. Now it's they're kind of the same.
Goliath it's a hard worker, but it's not particularly inspired.
No. Giovanola definitely did a good job. That thing runs like a dream.
Goliath
it's solid
is
as heck.
Trying to get into Stanford and probably will, but doesn't know why it's going.
Yes. I'll give it to
Millennium's going to, a B-list art school.
It is. Berklee College of Music, sure. Millennium Force. Let's compare... Okay. We all know Ian O'Donnell is an Arrowhead. I've written so many articles on our website about Arrow. Pete is not, but...
Categorically not.
But Pete's 100th credit was Viper at Six Flags Magic Mountain.
I had it all planned out. It's my own fault for thinking about it too much. So we were strategizing. I think on my 88th credit when we arrived to California.
Yep.
So there was a tremendous amount of planning on my part, and somewhat on Ian's part because I was soliciting opinions. But so we went to Knott's unexpectedly. So I got 2 credits that changed the plans a little bit. So we go to Magic Mountain, we're riding rides, just kind of eyeing X2. And the reason why I wanted X2 to be my 100th is because A, it looks like a bitchin' ride, and it turned out to be. But I don't know. I thought symbolically it would be funny because X in Roman numerals is 10.
Yep.
2, you could say maybe it's squared, so 10 squared is 100, and boom. I'm sure I'm not the only person that's ever thought about that, and it's pretty lame. But that was the plan. That was what I wanted to do. I was like, it's got to be either Twisted Colossus or X2. And
yeah.
I decided on X2, and I think that's what cursed us on that first day. I'm deciding that the universe thought it was lame and decided to punish me.
Punish you with Viper. This is the thing with Viper. It is an absolute monster. It is the last Aero Megalooper that we have left, which is pretty special. And frankly, it's so intense in ways that I don't think other coasters are. Now, I'm an Aero snob, insane. Like, I have a Vortex tattooed on my body, like the Vortex logo from King's Island tattooed on my body. So I loved Viper. I think it's amazing. Do I wish it had a straight drop? Absolutely. Sorry. But the sequence of the triple loop and like the first loop into the turn and then the 2 loops following, even the bottom of that twisted first drop is so intense and amazing. But do I think it's better than what many argue is one of Aero's other masterpieces, which is Magnum XL 200 at Cedar Point?
I just want to, before we get into it, I want to say I liked Viper. I'm glad that I kind of was like, when we were because X2, they said basically it's not going to open today, and we still had more rides to ride, so I was like, well, we're not going to just stop riding, so right. I have to choose something. The only other option, I think, was Apocalypse, and while I liked Apocalypse more, it's not a particularly notable or iconic ride. And so going back to that VHS tape of POV roller coaster videos, I think Viper is the first one that they show you. So it's like, okay, that'll do. It's been a part of my life for a long time.
It has, yeah, absolutely.
And it was fun. It just was uncomfortable for me.
Yes.
I'm a big person, and those trains are not accommodating for my kind.
Agreed. And if they can get the next gen Vekoma trains on that thing, I think it could be really, really spectacular, because just the intensity. I mean, you look at Viper and then you look at like Scream in the same park. Like it's like apples and oranges. Like Viper is just tears through its track to the point of which sometimes you're like, you shouldn't be going this fast. Like, what's going to happen? I don't know. It's just they don't make him like that anymore. Magnum is a much more controlled ride, which is weird to say because the airtime's insane. But Magnum still feels a little bit more refined, which, once again, those airtime hills at the end.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to give it to Magnum. I have never been the biggest fan of Magnum. I did like it on this last visit that we had. I think I've been sitting in the wrong seat.
Yes.
I know that there's a magic seat nonsense, which is probably true, but I've still never managed to get on that because they just tell you where to go. And but I forget where we sat on it.
Sit towards the front. In my opinion, Magnum's better towards the front.
Yeah, and it was still not very comfortable, but it was at least more fun. Like I got more out of it this time than I have in prior.
And those restraints, I admit, are not the most comfortable, and those trains are not the most comfortable. Aero, I mean, they're Aero mine train cars they threw on a hypercoaster, but I do think that Magnum with the airtime sequence, it's definitely more memorable in an interesting way. It's a hard choice. I'm going to go with Magnum. Magnum is still, I think, more iconic. I think Magnum is also more special with it breaking the 200-foot barrier.
Yeah, it has more in a ride that I look for. I'm not a huge inversion junkie.
Yeah.
I like an inversion if it's done well and it doesn't hurt me.
Viper likes to hurt you with its inversions.
All of the arrows.
I will say though that the Vipers, like the bottom of that first drop is so crazy, and then the laterals on that turn after the first loop, which feels very illegal.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just because it's crazy doesn't mean it's good.
Okay, I mean, I suppose that's true. We'll give it to Magnum. I'm fine with that. Listen, you won't have to argue with loving Magnum more than me. So I'll take Magnum. So we kind of get to the big boys now, the big hitters. This is a coaster I think we both kept forgetting about at Magic Mountain. We were like, oh wait, that's there too, and that's their premier launch coaster, Full Throttle.
Yeah, and it made us work for it too.
It did. We waited in line probably for like an hour and a half. At least, yeah.
Just
for
watching
that.
X2, thinking if this fucking thing opens, we're leaving this immediately.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's good. Full Throttle's fine.
Yeah, it was fun. I guess it doesn't really, apart from the loop, it doesn't really have a ton of things that define it for me. I can't remember exactly what happened. I know it does another backward launch, and then it will, So it was fun. I think, again, it maybe suffers from comparison based on what park it's in.
I agree. That's true. But even in this park, it doesn't really have any competition in terms of a large-scale launch coaster.
No, but like just in terms of like overall more of a package of a ride.
Yes,
I think there's others at
the
park.
Plaza's definitely feeling dated with its like, what was it called? YOLO, the YOLO aesthetic that it used to, like Neil said. I mean, it is YOLO the ride. The airtime over the loop is cool at the end. But does it compare to Maverick? Absolutely not.
No.
Like, Maverick is... And I know mixed opinions on Maverick. I still think I argue it's might be the best coaster at Cedar Point.
I think that there's mixed opinions on Maverick. I don't know if there's ever mixed opinions that Maverick is good or not. I think it's about how good it is.
That's very true. Very, very true.
I just love Maverick. I forget what I have it as in my rankings, but ever since I wrote it, it just... I don't know. It has
it has everything.
Like.
It has the airtime. It has some really great inversions.
A good drop and a great launch.
Yes. Does it feel a little dated now that Velocicoaster's around? Absolutely. But
not that dated.
Not that dated. And I mean, those trains, those first-gen Intamin trains are not my favorite. If they could swap those out with some new ones with lap bars,
sure,
sign me up even more. But Maverick is great, and I actually have it ranked as my favorite coaster at Cedar Point. So I'm fine with... Yeah, I think Maverick definitely wins. Full Throttle's just another head-scratcher. Kind of like... Because some people would say, oh, let's compare Maverick to... what's it called? West Coast Racers. But, like, yeah, there's no competition there. Like, Maverick definitely wins. So, launch coasters, hands down. Maverick's got it. Finally, we have the big headlines, in my opinion, which are Steel Vengeance, of course, at Cedar Point. The... coaster king for many people still, versus we decide to combine the two, Twisted Colossus, which is a fun dueling Mobius loop coaster at Magic Mountain, RMC coaster, of course, and then X2, the Aero multidimensional beast.
Which, like, none of these three rides... I mean, obviously Steel Vengeance and
Twisted are similar types.
But they're doing different things.
Definitely.
The dueling versus the airtime, or not... Well, I guess...
I mean, they all have airtime. It all has airtime. Let's start with the thing that we...
It's a funky last comparison, just because Twisted Colossus doesn't really have an equivalent... When it comes to, like, what is the best ride at each park, everyone would probably say Steel Vengeance and X2.
Right.
And then, but there's Twisted Colossus, which is a great ride, and then it didn't have quite the equivalent.
Not really. I don't think so. I mean, maybe you could say Magnum. I don't know. I think that... Let's start with the real winner of the trip, which has to be X2.
Yeah.
I have waited to ride X2 since I was a literal child. My last trip to Magic Mountain was when they were transitioning it from X to X2. I saw it closed, being repainted from the yellow with pink track, which I still kind of love in its own awful way, to the gray and black.
Well, yeah,
it's not gray and black, the gray and red. Yeah, it did grow up.
It went from its childhood funky, bright colors, and now it's a little more,
refined and serious.
Reserved, but still crazy as shit.
Like, that first drop, I just don't think you can compare it to anything besides the other multidimensional coasters. Like, we want it to be like, oh, Tatsu's dive loop. That's something no, not even close. Like, the fact is, you're diving face first, and you flip forward. I mean, it's insane. And then you flip into that Raven turn. My expectations for X2 were astronomical, and it somehow exceeded them. I can't think of another coaster that's done that in a long time that's really exceeded my expectations in that way.
Yeah, I had very high expectations for X2. I was a little more hesitant with mine because Arrow has a history of hurting me. And, you know, I've been burned before.
You have, yeah.
But it was great. It was so good. It was, you know, it was not smooth necessarily, but it was not rough. It was the right amount of kind of roller coaster texture. But also just balls out insane.
I mean, it's doing, like, I never thought about the fact that it really is doing an invert coaster, a flying coaster, a wing coaster. It's doing all of those within a pretty short ride time. There are points where you're feeling a flying coaster moment, points where you're an invert, and then points where you're going down headfirst into the dirt, which I don't think any other coaster can say it does that way. It's special. And I now this is the real argument is going to be Twisted Colossus, I think, is also great. That's why we paired it with it. We didn't get a dueling ride, and frankly, they're pretty rare from what we were looking at with the cycles. It definitely suffers when you don't have a duel, though. You're kind of like,
I think if you had asked me which of the two between X2 and Twisted Colossus I would have liked more at the beginning of our trip, I probably would have said Twisted Colossus just because I love Steel Vengeance, I know. But I really liked Twisted Colossus. I wish we could have gotten another ride on it.
Yeah, I agree.
It was, especially like a good dueling ride. Mm-hmm. It didn't have the airtime that I love in a roller coaster of its kind. Like, it was a little jerkier. I'm not as much of a fan of like the quick ejector that it has.
Yes, definitely.
I like something usually a little more sustained. It's gorgeous. I mean, it's a very attractive ride. It was very fun. I just didn't like it as much as I thought I would. Whereas with X2, again, expectations were high, but they were completely blown away. And we didn't even have like the full effect of the music with
the flames or all that.
The station going X2. Like, none of that was there. It was one train ops.
Yeah.
All the operators looked very depressed. They're like, oh shit, we had to come to work today. It was a Monday too, so like it wasn't the busiest day at the park, but everything else was closed, so I guess that they decided to call in the X crew, and we happened to reap the benefits.
We did. Steel Vengeance for me is hard. We know, like, Alex and Sean, of course, don't like Stevie and are not the most RMC friendly people. That being said, we always talk about how much we love the Topper Track Woodies, like Outlaw Run, amazing. I think Steel Vengeance is still objectively such a great ride, and it does so much. I personally think X2 does more in a tidier package, which is weird to say. The last couple of airtime hills on Steel Vengeance to me just are overkill to the point where they're uncomfortable. But the first half of Steel Vengeance I love, like that outside airtime moment, the wave turns, all of that.
I think I really love it. I agree with you on the last airtime hills. They're kind of dumb. I think that they were like, we need like 3 more seconds of airtime.
Yeah, let's throw them in here. Yeah.
And that's the kind of airtime that I don't love. But the rest of, like you said, I don't know. I love the ride. I know why it is right now my number one. I'm still kind of rethinking that. And if we ever go back to Magic Mountain, it might be that. I put X2 as my number 2 coaster at this point. And I think if we hadn't ridden Steel Vengeance in the back this last time...
and a rear seat ride,
and it was
really
a hot day. We waited like 2 hours in the sun, so maybe I was delirious.
It's true.
I just had a great time. It was so fun.
And I do think that, unfortunately, with Steel Vengeance, because, Twisted Colossus, just like you said, it kind of is lacking. Because that sounds bad. It is a great coaster. But compared to Steel Vengeance's first half, which is just so large and, like, grand... it's sad because Twisted Colossus is built on this massive old wooden dueling coaster, and they've really chopped it down a lot.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have the scale that you kind of expect it to. And then the 2 laps on it is fine, but kind of weird. I don't know.
There's something about it that just didn't add up to what I was made to believe it was.
It was still great. It just, I kind of wish they didn't do the Mobius loop.
Oh, I don't like a Mobius. I think I liked it better than West Coast Racers because you don't just sit there for a minute until
while you wait. Yeah,
the other farts load the train and then get ready. So I don't know. I liked that. I didn't have to watch this, the video without the audio on.
Yeah, right.
So I didn't mind that, and it just wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't quite what I hoped it would be. So I definitely think X2 was the clear winner.
Yeah, and if we're going to compare the two parks, if we're willing to package X2 and Twisted versus Stevie, I think they win as a combo.
I know that we paired Maverick up with Full Throttle, but if we had to, so my top two at each park, obviously X2 and Twisted Colossus,
yes,
and then Maverick and
Stevie.
Stevie. If they were talking about top two in that regard, absolutely Cedar Point for me.
Okay, I can take that. And actually, I know he said we wouldn't keep track, but I've been keeping a little bit of track. And let's get to the big question, which is the better park? Which is America's coaster park? If you look at the top 5, with the exception of X2 being just bonkers insane and having a hard time, for the most part, Cedar Point wins. Top Thrill Dragster, definitely better than Superman. Millennium Force, better than Goliath. Magnum, better than Viper. And Maverick over Full Throttle. But once you get to the supporting coasters, I think that's where things get a little fuzzier. I think that Magic Mountain has a stronger supporting lineup in terms of Apocalypse, and obviously Ninja, and Revolution, and all of those great coasters. I think there's a little bit more to be said for its supporting lineup than Cedar Point's. That being said, the two parks together really would be perfect. They really have everything.
So, in my mind, as a tiebreak, we're going to have to give it to Magic Mountain because they have Dole Whips.
Point taken. You're right. Yeah. Oh, God.
No, not really. I mean, maybe.
Maybe a little bit. But we love Dole Whip.
I do love a Dole Whip.
It's the best. Yeah. I think that, and I wish we had a more satisfying ending. We'd be like, this is distinguished, definitely it.
If Cedar Point had the kind of days that that we had at Magic Mountain, again, there were some closed rides, which is, a Six Flags
staple
specialty.
Sure.
But everything else ran smoothly, and our last visit to Cedar Point was kind of like emotionally exhausting because nothing would open. They would close for like a slight breeze.
Yeah.
It's packed every day. There's never a day that is not super busy. Even if it's like raining, it's busy there.
So let's say we have a hypothetical who we want some person has scrounged their pennies together and they're only able to visit one of these two parks. Which one would you recommend? Maybe that's a good way to attack this question. Kings Island. Just kidding.
Kings Island.
Kings Island. Okay, hear us out. Kings Island forever. You will never have a better day at a park than you will at Kings Island. It is so pleasant. It is so well run. It's such an easy layout. Are any of these coasters the best in the world?
And there's great wood coasters.
There are great wooden coasters, yes. But if we have to choose between Cedar Point and Magic Mountain, I'm going to think I'd tell them to go to Magic Mountain.
I think I would agree with you, despite my better wishes as someone who has lived in Ohio my whole life.
They're both very distinctive. And
Cedar Point is just like work. It's work to go there.
Correct.
It's far away from anything.
Sandusky is a sad land.
I don't like to say. I've never spent time in there except for Cedar Point. I've heard it's kind of a shithole, but that's not up to me. I've never...
You're right.
If you go on even a slightly busy day, you have to wait on that damn peninsula in the traffic.
Sun. Yeah,
it's a mess. And then they closed those side entrances, so even if you did get there and you wanted to kind of cut in line, unless you're staying at the breakers, you can't get in. I guess that's the case at Magic Mountain, too. They have that one entrance, and it's like a mile away from parking. So
sure, that's true.
No, I think I would say Magic Mountain.
I agree.
Maybe just because it's the novelty of it, and we just went, and it was fun. But I don't know.
It has a lot of special things going for it.
Yeah,
it has a lot of special things. Not that Cedar Point doesn't, but Cedar Point, like the reason you're going there is these 5 rides, right? Is Millennium Force, it's Maverick, it's Steel Vengeance, Dragster.
And I don't know.
And Magnum, sort of. Magnum or Valraven,
Or Raptor.
Or Raptor, I guess. But if it just takes so much work to get to those rides, like we would never have had the morning we had at Magic Mountain at Cedar Point right now.
Yeah, I think that honestly at this point I don't want to go to Cedar Point unless it's like snowing out, unless I have a fast pass.
Yes,
it's just not worth it.
True.
Because you will not get on all the rides you want to get on. You'll wait 2 hours for Steel Vengeance, which is a great ride, but at this point it's like I don't have that kind of time. I'm too grown.
It's true.
I'm too I'm too grouchy to
I
wait.
am to wait in these long lines in the sun. So, and like I said, definitely the layout of Magic Mountain benefits from the fact that it's a regional park design. It's planned. It has a logic to it. Cedar Point is literally this peninsula. It's just developed more than it should.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to give it to Magic Mountain. That being said, visit both.
Absolutely.
And then if you're in Ohio, you get to go to Kings Island and Cedar Point. I mean, Ohio still, in my opinion, this is going to be controversial. I would still take Cedar Point and Kings Island over Knott's and Six Flags Magic Mountain.
Yeah. Knott's is 3 great rides.
Charming as hell.
I know you don't love an invert, but I really did love Silver Bullet.
Yes,
Silver Bullet I might actually like more than Raptor, which is crazy.
But it's a good coaster.
But it was really fun.
It's really good.
It had what I like in an invert.
Yep.
Accelerator is
elite.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
And then
Ghost Rider, Chef's Kiss.
Yeah.
Chef's Kiss. But come to Ohio. Come visit Ohio. Ohio Coaster Kings. We know we're not in the most exciting state, but we are in a state that has great roller coasters. And so that's it. Sorry for rambling on a little longer than an hour. But make sure to go on to thecoasterkings.com. There's new articles being posted all the time. And things are getting warmer. We're going to be doing more trips all over. European team has a whole schedule planned. We're getting schedules planned here. So we're going to be out on the road here soon. We'll see you all in the parks. Again, this is Ian.
And I'm Keith.
Have a great rest of your guys' day, and thank you for listening.
Bye.